This whole movement is about recognizing the one size fits all system does not fit every child. I'm Mandy Drogin, the campaign director of Next Generation Texas at the Texas Public Policy Foundation.
Tell me what your focus is, Mandy. What do you do, and what do you think it means to Texans?
My focus is the next generation of Texans. I am a mom of three. I have a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And my whole objective in life is to prepare them to launch into the future. And my job is to prepare children to launch into the future. I want to see that the next generation of Texas enjoy the freedoms and prosperities that we enjoy now, which most importantly is to get an education that really does prepare them to launch into the career, into the workforce, or sorry, into the military or into higher education. So whatever the path is for a child, I want to make sure that each and every child has access to a high quality education and that they can reach their full potential in life.
What does it mean to you when you say that have access to a high quality education? Do you believe that educational savings accounts or school vouchers is critical to achieving that?
Yes, education savings accounts are critical for two reasons. First and foremost, every single parent should be the number one decision maker in their child's education. A parent should be able to select the school that provides the best education and the value alignment with the family's goals for their children. So it should not be dictated strictly based on the street that you live on. Right now, our system is pretty antiquated. If you can afford to live in a specific neighborhood on a specific street, that's the school that you are dictated or mandated to go to by the government. It's an old system that doesn't serve children, each individual child. Parents should be making that decision. That's why education savings accounts are so crucial to making sure that every child has access to the best education. If you're zoned for a great public school and you're happy with it, that's wonderful. That's what we want. We want to see great schools for all students. But if your child is not zoned for a great school and you're unhappy with the education, maybe they're in the 50% of kids that can't read on grade level, the 60% that can't do math on grade level. A parent, regardless of their income, should have the opportunity to select a better learning environment that will prepare their children. But education savings accounts does more than just provide an off-ramp for a child that's not excelling and succeeding at their assigned public school. It also incentivizes the public school system to get better. Look, we've got far too many kids that are falling behind. Our school systems are not focusing on the basics that truly prepare kids to be successful in life. Reading, writing, math, civics. There's been an emphasis on things outside of the classroom. We've got all these DEI that's going on, these privilege walks that I hear about, these SEL programs. There's too many things that are being focused on that do not truly prepare children for their future. Parents see it and they know it. And what happens when we introduce education savings accounts is parents can say to the administration, they can say to the school leaders, look, I want this to be focused on. I want you to be teaching my kids phonics-based learning, no more of this whole language and 3Qing that's been proved to be not as successful as phonics for reading. I want you to be teaching my kids high-quality math. I want you to be teaching my kids civics so they understand why America is the greatest nation that's ever existed. I want you to stop focusing on things that don't align with my values. And the incentive for the districts and the leaders is to say, I want parents to choose our schools. We're going to do better. It is absolutely a rising tide that will lift all boats. We've seen it all across the country. Florida's low-income students, for example, went from number 33 in the nation to number 1, where they still are today. We saw Indiana's kids do the same thing. They went from 22 to number 3. It does improve the entire system. And that's what we want. Here in Texas, the next generation has to be prepared to lead our nation. As goes Texas, so goes the country.
So, totally understand your stance that it incentivizes public schools to get better. However, there are public schools who say, you have not fully funded, when I say you, the legislature has not fully funded us, so
Yeah.
we cannot perform up to our potential. Do you believe there is a way, and that this is the way forward in Texas, to fully fund public schools as well as providing ESAs?
Yeah, so I always ask, what is the number? So let's be clear. We funded public education per the Texas Education Agency. We funded it over $15,000 per student in the 2022-2023 school year. We actually spent more than that. Our expenditures were $16,792 per student. That's $92.3 billion was spent on public education. This constant narrative of fully funded, they will never actually tell you a dollar amount. And that's very strategic. They can constantly say, we can't do better. We can't have more than 50% of kids reading on grade level because we're not fully funded. Nearly $17,000 per student is almost twice as much as the average private school in the state of Texas, which comes in at roughly $10,000. So when people say that, it's just not true. And when you ask taxpayers who just got their tax bills and they continue to see their property taxes go up, $16,792 per child. I don't know what the number is that they will say is fully funded. Do I think more money needs to go into the classroom? Absolutely. But I'll say the system's been set up to steer the money outside of the classrooms. We've got far too many lobbyists and consultants and these industry tech vendors and things like that have come up with all these reasons to send money away from our teachers. Look, we've got Roscoe ISD. They spent $46 million with Stride K-12 a couple of years ago. That's an online virtual learning system. That is more money than they spent per child in the classrooms for their teachers. It's an abomination. It has to stop. We've got to course correct an entire system. And again, we have to incentivize them to send the money to the teachers in the classroom teaching a high quality curriculum and cut down on these outside entities that have figured out a way to stick their hand in that public education cookie jar.
Tell me what the next, I don't know, 10 days, 30 days look like for you guys as the legislative session is now right in front of us. What does your team focus on, and what do you do as the session is just about to begin, and then once it does finally begin?
Well, I have the most incredible team and we focus on a whole lot of priorities. So we do K through 12, higher education, and workforce development. And really it does all intersect, right? It's important. You've got to have that great, strong foundation to help kids as they prepare to launch. But so the Parent Empowerment Coalition will be working to advance education savings accounts here. We'll be making sure that we're united in educating leaders and parents about what this means, regardless of what school you provide to put your children in, or if you homeschool, a private school, blended school, whatever it is, every parent should understand the impacts and the great opportunity with education savings account. Of course, we'll be looking at what's going on in charter schools and making sure that charter schools that are successful, are highly successful ones, they have access to that facilities funding that will allow them to grow. We want to see workforce development opportunities. You know, one of the great things about an ESA is that it can be used for career and technical education. This is so vital as we're looking at the lack of qualified workers that we're hearing from the business sector. You know, the Workforce Commission came out and said that we're going to be short 10,000 electricians, 6,000 plumbers, 8,000 oil and gas workers. These careers that kids, while they're still in high school, can be finishing their high school degree and pursuing certifications for these really high-paying jobs. We're going to make sure that those opportunities are available for kids. It really is about laying the groundwork so the next generation of Texas can be successful.
A couple more questions for you. Talk to me about accountability when it comes to ESAs, because that's something I've heard as I've spoken with people who are sort of on the other side of the coin, who are not in favor of programs like this. They worry that we are giving public tax dollars to private entities and that there's not as much accountability. With public schools, we know, there are, like it or not, there are tests that see our kids performing and that type of thing. You know where the dollars are going. And there's concerns that you wouldn't know, and there wouldn't be as much accountability with ESAs.
Yeah, that's a great question. I love to dispel that myth because it's simply not true. So the the private schools that are eligible to opt in, and let's be clear, it is opt in. Schools that choose to accept ESAs are families that choose to participate in the ESA program, which would be the first and foremost level of accountability, right? A parent is actively choosing this regardless of their income or the state they live in. But on that academic accountability, the accredited private schools, ESAs, are set up to be used for accredited private schools in Texas, and accredited private schools already require norm reference testing. To be an accredited private school, you can go through TPSAC. There's 19 accrediting bodies, and it's set up very similar to, I would say, how higher ed is. There's audits, there's educational audits, there's financial audits. These kids are doing norm reference tests, which was included in the language. So there is accountability. Believe it or not, parents that are selecting a school outside of their zoned public school, they actually are doing it because they want their child to be in a great educational environment. So there absolutely is accountability. And there's even more than that. There's a parent satisfaction survey that is a part of it, which has provided in other states really great results to see how happy parents are. So I would actually challenge the public school system to do the same thing. You want to know, are parents happy? Do they believe their children are being prepared for success? And there's this false notion that somehow being for or a part of the parent empowerment movement and being for education savings accounts means that you dislike or you don't want kids to go to public schools. I am actually a public school parent. I want public schools to be the very best that they can be. I want taxpayer dollars to be used responsibly to educate children and not make the profiteers millionaires and billionaires. I want to make sure that teachers receive the compensation that they deserve when they're delivering great education. This whole movement is about recognizing the one size fits all system does not fit every child, but that we do need to improve the public education system as well. So it's not in any way trying to be critical, but it's about saying, hey, where there's problems, let's address them.
Just a couple more things for you, Mandy. Number one, I've noticed in our language, you are saying ESAs, educational savings accounts. A lot of people will say school vouchers. Are these two different things to you? Is the voucher lingo, is that not right for us to be using in Texas? Or just tell me why you prefer to say ESAs, why school vouchers is not the right language in your opinion.
Thank you for asking that question. Vouchers and education savings accounts are completely different. Vouchers are really, well, they were the original form of school choice. So going back to African-American Democrat lawmaker Polly Williams, who really helped start the first voucher program in inner city Milwaukee, she recognized that the kids in the inner city of Milwaukee schools were failing miserably, and they introduced vouchers. It was a direct transfer of the money to the private school that the children would be going to. But that was, again, 30 plus years ago. And as school choice has grown, one of the benefits of Texas not being first is we get to be bold and get it right. Education savings accounts really stormed the nation in the past 6 years because they are incredibly flexible and they allow for the education system to truly be customized for kids. So I mentioned that they can be used for career and technical education. They can be used for tutoring, therapies, all sorts of other aspects that go into funding a child's education. So voucher, it's old school. It's also been, quite frankly, used as a pejorative. So over time, kind of the opposition to empowering parents with choices, they use that knowing, no matter how many times we say education savings accounts and here's how they're different, a lot of times opposition will use that. And they've moved from voucher to saying, voucher-like scheme, right? They want to put it in this bucket where the reality is that education savings accounts are incredibly flexible so that parents who know and love their child more than any system, any school, any bureaucrat are able to truly customize the education to make sure that children are prepared to launch and be successful.
Two final questions. Number one, do you believe, as the governor has said, that there are the votes in the legislature now to pass this?
Yes, so I 100% believe that there are the votes there. I think that it's really important to keep educating the lawmakers that because I don't, I mentioned the profiteers earlier. I do not think that the opposition to empowering parents for education freedom are going to lie down. I don't think they're going to stop. I'm seeing it every day, the misinformation. You asked about there's no accountability. That's a really common talking point. And when I point out there's more accountability, right? If a parent is unhappy with a private school, they can leave. There is the norm reference test in there. There are accountability surveys. You are actually spending less money per child. There is financial accountability to the taxpayer. So when you point that out, it's not necessarily talked about because it doesn't fit with the narrative. So I don't think that the opposition, those unions, associations, lobbyists, and that kind of cabal that are constantly in the Capitol and working the legislators are going to stop. They will continue to try and sow seeds of doubt or confusion. And that's why the parent empowerment movement that swept across Texas is so important, is that these lawmakers are smart enough to know who's being paid to advocate for one position versus the parents, the millions of parents that have risen up across every socioeconomic status, across every demographic, from the political spectrum, across race, across income, everything else. They are united in saying, we are the ultimate decision maker for our children, and we want education savings accounts. And that'll shine through and that'll get through to the lawmakers, but we're not going to stop until Governor Abbott's pen signs that law.
You have confidence in the momentum, but there's no letting off the gas.
That's right. Foot on the pedal to the metal, and we are going forward until every single parent across the state of Texas is free to select the very best education for their child.
Final question for you, Mandy. Is there a dollar amount that is the right dollar amount, or is there a targeted group that is the right group to start with in Texas? Or do you believe that every child should be eligible for this from the get-go and that the money will be worked out in the next 140 days?
Yeah, I believe that every single parent has the right to select the very best school for their children. And of course, if you're upper middle class, if you're wealthy, you can do that. You can move to an excellent public school district or you can afford to pay for private schools. But fundamentally, I believe in the freedoms that made this country and the great state of Texas so prosperous and so successful. And that's the right of every parent to make decisions that will benefit their children, whether it's where they worship, where they work, where they eat, and where they educate their children. So yes, at the foundation of it, every single parent, it's why universal education savings accounts is what we believe must be passed in the 89th legislature. Now, do I think there should be prioritization? Absolutely. I would love to see that every parent has access to this, and I would encourage the legislature to make sure that the appropriation is enough where that every parent that needs to utilize an ESA has access. It is perfectly acceptable to prioritize and recognize there are disadvantaged students, those students that are in the low income or special needs area who are struggling, whose parents have absolutely no ability to pick up and move, or that their children are not getting the education services that their civil rights guarantee, whatever it is. So I think that we saw that in HB 1 of the fourth special session where there was a prioritization of low income and special needs students. I believe that we'll see a prioritization as well, but I also am hopeful that enough money is appropriated from general revenue for the education savings account so that any parent, regardless of where they live, regardless of how many kids they have or what their income is, every single parent has the right to select the best education for their children and has the right to access an education savings account.